Good everyone. I hope you guys have an amazing day. So what I'll do today, I'll talk about two things. One is how to measure the performance using a right report, and we'll talk about some of the sales compensation and what's the best way to approach it. So this is not going to be a very long video. I will make it very tiny because, I just wanted to make sure you guys understand when you go to a business to talk about these things, right? So obviously, if you're a sales cloud consultant, there is some expectation when you go to when you go to a business, right? Could be of any business when you want to do consulting, and when they talk about the sales process, right? Obviously, the sales process drives everything because the sales is what brings money to a business, right? And if the sales team is not doing well, there are a few things you need to factor. First of all, how they're running the sales process, right? And what is the tool they're using to measure the sales performance? Because the sales performance is very important. Um, Without the sales performance, there's no way a business can measure the progress, right? Now, if you are talking from a Salesforce perspective, there are different ways you can measure your the sales team performance. Obviously, the most easiest way is to use the Salesforce inbuilt report, or you can also use Tableau for data visualization. We're not going to get into that. Let's stick to a very simple reporting structure, right? We have Salesforce out-of-box reporting tool, and you can obviously, ask the right question when you're talking to a sales manager. The first question: how do you measure your sales team performance? What is the way? What reporting tools you use? They might say, "Hey, we don't use Salesforce reporting tool. We might use Power BI reporting tools," which is fine. Now, when there's a Power BI reporting tool, your question should be the kind of things you measure. For instance, you need to, like, for instance, right? Uh, Salesforce has given some few pointers, the things which you should consider as like a minimum standard which you should have when it comes to reporting, the things you wanted to measure when it comes to sales performance. So that being said, you can extend on top of it as well. The first thing, how much outbound communication, calls and email is my sales team doing? So obviously, it's very important for the sales team to contact the customer. Uh, could be in the form of retention, customer retention, or asking customer if they wanted to buy a new product, right, as a part of an opportunity. So that could be done in the form of calls, that could be done in the form of email, right? So obviously SMS is not a great option. So when your sales team is involved in that, you obviously, as a sales manager, you wanted to measure that. Now, how do you measure that? You can create a report to measure that, to target the right object so that you can get the information and latest and up-to-date information. How many customers are there in each state or a country? You can use a territory management to do that, and you can build a report to give you that detailed description, um, to give you an indication about the customer representation based on state or country. Like, for instance, in New Zealand, we don't really have a concept of state, but we have regions, so you can measure based on that. In the United States, you have state. Um, so um, yeah, what accounts are in each sales team member's name? So this is very important from a sales manager perspective because obviously sales manager wants to know which accounts you're dealing with. Are you dealing with high priority accounts? There are some accounts which are very critical. The reason why I'm saying critical, there might be a scenario where a customer in the verge of leaving, and there might be a very high paying customer. So as a sell and so what will happen? Let's say, let me give you a very simple scenario. Let's say, a 10 customer left your business last year, right? They decide to go somewhere else. Now, as a sales manager, you can look at the sales team who handled those accounts. And if you have a report in place, you can obviously, figure out way earlier to see, hey, these customers need some love, some attention. So you can request your sales team, hey, can you look at this customer ASAP? Can you deal with this customer ASAP to ensure we have a right retention policy in place? So the reports really help. And now, there are some scenarios. There might be a scenario where uh, sales manager may not be interested to view the sales dashboard every week, every day. They might be doing end of weeks, let's say on Friday evening, which is fine. But as long as you have a right report in place, you can get the refreshed, latest sales information, latest data on the screen. How much was paid to each sales member? That's a compensation information. As a sales manager, you might want to have that view so that you can get that information. Now, the another question you should be asking: who should have access to this, right? Obviously, not everyone should be having access to this report, right? So that's why it's very important that you have to factor who should have access to the report. You can control that using the right permissions in Salesforce, which is pretty simple to do. So that's up to the business to decide: should a sales manager have access to it, or a VP of sales, or should a finance team should have access to it? I mean, just a question you should be asking to a business if you're going as a consultant, right? These are the right things to ask. I just give you one example, right? There could be a different scenarios, but and these are the four pointers you can consider when you are talking to a business when it comes to tracking performance using reports, right? However, there might be a scenario where business might be having more pointers. They might be using different metrics, which is fine. That's why I mentioned we they might be using different tools. Power BI. So if you're using Power BI, uh, just have a look at how the data is ingested, right? Are they using the right table structure? If they're getting a data from Salesforce, how they're getting it, right? Those kind of information you should know. Okay, so that's in a nutshell from how to track a performance using a report. Now, compensation is a very important topic. Obviously, salespeople work on commission at some place. At other place, it may not be the case, but let's say, for the sake of argument, the salespeople are using a compensation, right? They're getting compensated in the form of a commission. Now, all this information needs to be written down in a compensation plan document, and that document should be rubber stamped from a senior stakeholder to say, hey, this is what we're sticking to. And also, please make sure that you have a policy in place. If you wanted to, let's say, change your policy every 6 months, that needs to be communicated with your sales team, because otherwise, what will happen? Let's say, for a sake of argument, you have a compensation policy in place where it's been agreed, let's say start of Jan, let's say 2024, for every $1 million worth of sales you bring, you will get 10% commission. Okay. Now, a sales guy works very hard, and when it comes to, let's say, July, the business decides, hey, we're going to change the plan to shrink it to 8%. Now, that's not going to go very well with the sales team, because they will challenge that narrative, right? They will say, why are you deciding that when we worked hard to make sure that you're bringing, let's say, $1 million worth of sale? And if you say, hey, we are in a loss, then the question will be, are you sure you're in a loss? You just made $1 million worth of sale. I mean, it might be the case business might be in loss because there are other areas of business which have performed drastically bad, so which has impacted the whole business performance. So if that's the case, I still believe as a business you stick to the commitment to what you have agreed and communicate the right message to the people. So that's very important. So, and also you need to make sure who you want to distribute this document. It could be with the finance team, so they're across what you coming up in terms of monetary plan, because obviously it affects the finance, right? So compensation plays a very big role when it comes to finance side of things. And different businesses have different modes of compensating their sales team. Some works on compensation based on a product. Let's say if you sell a product, you will get, let's say, 2% commission. Some based on subscription based model, some based on like a monthly lump sum commission based cycle based on let's say at the end of the month, based on number of products you sell, you will get X amount of money, right? Some based on different model, like I gave an example. If you're planning to bring 1 million worth of sales, then you will get 10% commission, something like that. And also, please make sure that there are no loopholes in the document, because what will happen if a sales member figured out there's a loophole, that person will obviously go for it. It's a human nature, right? You agree or not, or disagree with it. It is how it works. And when they explore it, you as a CEO are obliged to pay what is agreed, because you can't really say, "Oh, it's our fault." That's a reputation risk, right? So you need to factor that, because that's why it's very important. You need to distribute the document with the right stakeholders so that you make sure your documents are properly read and rubber stamped by the right stakeholders. So that's something you should know. So obviously, we're not doing much Salesforce hands-on at this stage, because, like I said, this is a consulting certification. It's very important you guys have a fairly clear understanding. What does a consultant do? You might even face the scenario where you go to a business and say, "Hey, we are struggling with the reporting side of things. We're not sure how to track uh, our sales performance." So you as a consultant can say, "Hey, we can do reporting." And then your question should be, what kind of things you need to report, right? That you as a consultant should sit with the business, maybe the business owners, and try to understand it, right? It's a great position to be in. That's why I still believe consulting is a pretty amazing job, right? I used to be consultant back in the days. Then I started my own company. So I still enjoy consulting. It's a beautiful thing. Now I consult as an architect, so which is a different story altogether, because I often get contracted through my company. I do contracting through my company, so um, it's pretty good, because I get to do what I wanted to do at the end of the day, right? That's the best part of consulting. You can be a consultant, you can be an architect consultant, you can be you be a tech consultant doing development. So there are different types of consulting, right? I don't really want to get into it, but just for the sake of argument, what I'm trying to say, right? Consulting is an interesting part of business, right? It generates a lot of money for a company if you are into consulting business, because obviously every business needs an advice, right? Depending upon the tech stack they use. So that's all I wanted to cover in today's episode. Hope you guys have an amazing Monday. Adios.